Well, welcome again to North Point. My name is Jordan, and I get to be the student director here. And I'm so glad that you're with us or tuning in online. Maybe you're here this morning because your significant other said you had to be here. Or maybe you told your significant other they couldn't come today because you wanted to interpret the information first. Maybe you're here and you didn't know we were doing a relationship series, but maybe you're a Chiefs fan and you made some promises. There you go. We got some Chiefs in the back. The whole chant. I've always been envious of the war chant too. Maybe you made some promises in the fourth quarter to God or whoever is out there, and you're like, hey, if this comeback happens, I'll be in church on Sunday, and now here you are. Or maybe you're a 49ers fan, and you're looking for some hope and some healing here this morning, which I've been there too. However it is that you got to be here, I think you've joined us for one of the most exciting series of the year, because our heart behind every part of this series is ultimately that we are for healthy relationships. Wherever you are currently at or whatever that means for you, we are for healthy singleness, healthy dating, healthy marriages, and next marriage. We're for your healthy heartbreak and heartache. And our hope is that you would discover hope and a way forward, that whether today is the best things have ever been for you or the hardest and darkest, that this isn't your forever reality, that 10 years from now for all of us could be richer than we ever dreamed or imagined. But before we get very far in our conversation today, I want to ask a question that I want all of us to think about individually, how we would answer it, just personally, for ourselves. And the question is this: what has shaped your perspective of what an ideal relationship should look like? Because if we don't know what the end goal is, if we don't know what the win is, we can't develop a plan of what it is that we're walking towards. And it perhaps is just as important to know what has influenced that ideal relationship in the future as well. And if those things should have influenced what we think a picture-perfect person or relationship might look like. I think for me, going back to, my earliest childhood, I think the, OG perfect couple was Simba and Nala. And, I'll fight with anybody on that. I think the live action one was awesome. I think the technology was great. Just doesn't capture their emotion in the same way. Kids these days, they won't know the spark that Simba and Nala had together. Maybe it was something like that for you. Maybe it was some kind of chick flick or some kind of Hollywood romance. Maybe it was something like Jack and Rose for you. And it was this relationship that never should have been in society's eyes, but then it was, and then it was incredible. But for me with this movie, this is where I started to lose some trust with Hollywood and feel like I needed to look elsewhere. Because every time I see the end of the movie, I'm like, Jack, just get on the raft. Like, stop being so dramatic and making this all about you. Like, just get up there. And in fact, Mythbusters agree with me. They did a whole test on this, and they showed all of the different ways that Jack could have gotten on the raft. Next to each other, on each other. They could have played cards. It just didn't need to be that way. So maybe you've had a look elsewhere. Maybe growing up, you had some kind of list. Maybe you made a physical list of a right person list, and here's the qualities that I'm looking for. Maybe it's something that you've just kind of had in your head or, in your mind. For me personally, I have to acknowledge, just in terms of self-awareness, I might be a little skeptical of the list idea, because as a guy who is still stretching every day and taking his vitamins, hoping to get to 6 feet, it just seems like every list starts with above 6 feet for guys. And I'm like, so many great dudes that you miss out on out there, The under 6 foot guys club, y'all know what I'm talking about with that. But some of us, maybe we have some kind of list, and I do think there's a certain demographic of us in the room that our list has actually been given to us. Our list is very, very clear, which is good. We should be grateful for this. And I'll show you what I mean by being vulnerable with my own list, okay? Because here's what's on my list. Here's what I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to blonde hair with blue eyes, specifically 5'6" and 3/4 tall, who's a UT grad, loves popcorn, and is the mother of my golden doodle. And first name has to rhyme with McShmemily, right? That's my list, right? Because for me, I'm married. Emily and I have been married about 4 years now, and Emily is always my list. There was a 2-month window where I was into brown hair because Emily dyed her hair brown for 2 months, and she hated it. I thought she looked beautiful, but she switched it back as soon as she could. When she has gray hair, I'm going to be into gray hair, and I'm excited for that day. 5'6" and 3/4 will become 5'6", and then 5'5" and 5'4" as her spine begins to curve. And I can't wait to be a curved spine guy. Like, that day is coming, and I'm excited for it. I think it's just a good reminder for us married couples, like, we have our list already, and that's the list that's in front of us. But I do think, in all seriousness, it's good to ask the question, What's on your list? What would make your list? If you're a single person, who is it that you're looking for? If you're dating, what are you kind of comparing the person or the people that you're dating against? Like, what is on your list? If you are married, do we need the subtle or gentle reminder that we do have our list? Even though perhaps maybe we've begun to wonder, maybe something used to be on the list that isn't anymore because they've changed, or maybe I missed something on the original list, and maybe there's something on somebody else's list that is attractive, but I've just got to be reminded, I've got my list already. I think for all of us, it's inescapable that our parents, in some way, shape, or form, gave us a blueprint of what an ideal relationship would look like or what a picture-perfect person might look like, and they gave us a blueprint that either we want to copy or that we want to go in the complete opposite direction of, right? Whether your parents were together, you had a single parent, whoever raised you, we got some kind of blueprint. I think friends are probably similar. Friends influence our picture of a relationship. And maybe there's been some friends for us that we've kind of always looked up to and idealized, and we've always been trying to keep up with them, and we're like, man, I just wish I had what they had. Or maybe you've got some friends that you can just live kind of vicariously through, and you get to learn from their mistakes, and you're like, gosh, I don't want to replicate that. I think inevitably for all of us, one of the greatest kind of undercurrents that is an influence in our lives that's hard to really wrap our minds around how much this impacts us every single day is the culture that we live in. And that's not a bad thing. Every society needs a culture. We talked about, last week, the idea that our culture has changed so much in even the last 10 years. And it's added some great things and some complex things to relationships. Social media has changed so much in 10 years. All of the technology and all the ways that we have to communicate now. There are so many different gray areas of a relationship now. And it can be confusing and it can be complex. But then I would argue there are certain areas where we don't even pause to reflect and realize how much culture impacts us. For example, if you are married or if you ever want to be married, you know that one step in that process is to have a girlfriend or to have a boyfriend. And if you use this phrase in our country and a lot of countries on the planet, people would know what you're talking about. But if you used this phrase 100 years ago in this country, nobody would have known what you were saying because you would have had a gentleman caller. Imagine if that was a Facebook status. I just got a new gentleman caller. Like, that's what the term would have been. It wasn't until about the 1950s or 60s that boyfriend and girlfriend became mainstream in a romantic sense. But that's so normal for us now. You grow up from a young age when you're a little kid expecting to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend eventually. Before World War II, only under 10% of engagement rings had an actual diamond in them. And then in 1947, De Beers launched a marketing campaign with the tagline, "A diamond is forever." And then guys, we've been poor ever since, right? Like, we know the story from there. But that's interesting because that is something that you really do care about. And ladies, like, this isn't bad to care about, but you do. It's got to be, round or an oval, or it's got to have a halo or silver or gold, or it's got to be a certain size, or I want to upgrade it in the future. And we really care. And it's something that is so culturally infused. And I think it is inescapable when you think about all that is marketed to us and all that we see in media, all that we listen to, all the music, even the angry relationship music, even when Carrie Underwood is beating up a car or Taylor Swift is talking about bad blood. I mean, even in those, there is still this undercurrent that is communicated to us that there is a one or a soulmate or a right person, just our person. Out there, somebody is out there for us. And that the pursuit of these is worth it. The pursuit of that person, the heartbreak is worth it, and the complexity is worth it. Because once we find them, we'll be happy. Now, I want to talk today specifically about what I think is perhaps the greatest myth currently undermining our relationships, or that has the potential to undermine our relationships if we are not aware of its existence. And that myth is the right person myth. But I want to define it for you so that there's not confusion, okay? The right person myth is this. It's once I find the right person, everything will be all right, with emphasis on the second part of the sentence. The second part of the sentence is what makes it a myth. I'm not saying you can't be a hopeless romantic and wonder if there's somebody out there for you and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole different conversation. I'm talking specifically about the second part, that once we meet them and they like us back, everything will be different after that moment. If you're single or you're dating, it looks like this, and we wouldn't say it this way, but this is how we act and this is how we engage with people. We think that, man, once I find that person, I'll just know. It will just be different. We will just get each other. And somehow, All of my past hurts and wounds and insecurities and rough edges and selfishness and the annoying parts and all of that are either going to cease to exist or they're going to cease to matter to the person on the other side of me because our love will be so strong and they'll accept me as I am. And then the same will be true for the person on the other side of me. In fact, you could argue from a scientific perspective that this is true, that the right person myth is not a myth for about 3 to 24 months. Because there is a scientific honeymoon stage. It is a real thing that lasts anywhere from 3 to 24 months when you get in a relationship with somebody that you're excited about. And there are about 5 chemicals that go haywire in this time period. And you are quite literally blind to the faults of the person on the other side of you. It is a very low conflict stage. It's a stage where it's hard to sleep because you're texting them and thinking about them and they're on your mind and all of that. And it's not a bad stage. It really isn't. We'll make fun of it and laugh at it, but the butterfly stage, it's not bad because it forms a bond for what is coming in the future. If we saw people for what they were, all of them right up front, we might not get in a relationship with anybody. So it's not a bad thing, but it usually works kind of something like this. Let's say this is you, and this is your significant other, or if you're single, this is the person you're dreaming of in the future, and we're all made up of parts. That's why we have these blocks on here. We're made up of parts. These parts, all have good parts. This is our personalities. This is our sense of humor. This is our interests and our talents and our gifts. There are so many good parts in every single one of us. And up front, when we meet somebody, we just see a very complete looking front without gaps, without holes. And we're like, man, this person is absolutely incredible. You meet somebody in the first 3 months, it's like, you know what? It's kind of cute how they get more food on their face than in their mouth when they take me on a date. It's awesome. And I saw his room, and I love to help, and I love to clean, and I love to serve, and this is great. Your friend's like, what's wrong with you? And then 6 months later, you're like, learn to use a fork and pick up after yourself, right? And it's a whole different switch because you've begun to see around the corner. And as you see around the corner, you realize that every single person on the other side of you has their gaps. Every single one of us has our imperfections. And so what we do is when we bought into the right person myth, we begin to wonder, am I really with the right person? Should I continue dating? Should I continue this relationship? And this is where I don't think married people are immune to this either. I think this is that subtle. Again, we wouldn't agree with it intellectually. We would be like, I found the right person. I married the right person. Everything wasn't all right. Like, we know it's a myth. But I think at a subconscious or an emotional level, we want it to be true. We behave or we live as if it is true. And we're kind of still hoping. And that's when we start to use that language of, well, it seems like they've changed. It seems like if they were the right person, that this would be so much easier. And so maybe I married the wrong right person. Or even the thought, even the wondering if there's a person out there that you would be happier with. That is us buying into the right person myth. The right person myth is a matter of perspective. And it's so important that we talk about the perspective that we have. That's why I asked up front, what has gone into your perspective? What has influenced your perspective of what an ideal relationship or what an ideal person would look like? Because the wrong perspective has the potential to undermine any relationship, regardless of how right the other person is. If my expectations are out of touch with reality, if they are unrealistic, if no human could ever fulfill that, it doesn't matter who is on the other side of me. I have already begun to undermine the relationship. The right person myth really is a perspective of searching. It's a perspective of looking for what I don't currently have, where I don't currently feel whole, and hoping that somebody will fill that for me. If you're in a relationship, it's a process of evaluating the person that you've been dating for a while, evaluating the person that you're married to, and wondering how they might change to make you more fulfilled or happier. I want to talk today about the exact opposite perspective. I want to flip it back on us, and I want us to talk about the perspective of becoming. And the reason that this is so helpful for us is because when you open up the pages of the Bible, it doesn't have a lot to say about the process of searching. It's not so helpful when you look at it for that. But when you look at the pages of the Bible and you look at the process of becoming, it comes alive. There is something on every page about who it is that we can become. And we want to look at scripture throughout this series because it is something that cuts through all of the noise. There is so much noise, so many blogs, so many opinions, so many articles on how we should live our relationships, but the Bible is something that is time-tested, that even if you have tensions with it, even if you don't fully trust it, it's something that is a unique resource to bring clarity and has been helpful to so many people. Specifically today, I want to look at the words of Jesus, and I want to look at a metaphor that he uses that is extraordinary because he provides for us the starting point for any relationship, the lens through which we should view any relationship. And in one metaphor, he explains who he is, who we are, like why we are here, and how we are supposed to interact with the people around us. It's absolutely extraordinary. It takes place around a dinner table. It takes place at the Last Supper when he's with his 12 closest guys, the 12 disciples, and they don't know it. But this is hours before he is to be arrested and crucified on a Roman cross. And so he knows these are his last moments, and he's like, guys, lean in, don't miss this. And the metaphor begins in John 15. And Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. Notice, you are not the vine. You are not supplying life. You are not supplying strength and energy and resources. You are not the gardener. You are not the farmer. You are not the one with the big picture, with the plan. You are not the one planting with a goal. You're not the farmer. You are something different. So what are you and I? Where are we in the metaphor? In verse 4, he says, remain, or abide is another translation. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. You're not the vine, you're not the farmer, you're not the gardener, you are the branches. And notice, this is so important, kind of a message for another time, but I want to point out, you're also not the fruit. You are not the result. You are not your actions. And I think specifically in a relationship series, that is so important to point out. You are not your worst mistake. You are not your good moments or your bad moments. Your identity is rooted in the vine. Who you are is attached to who Jesus says you are. That is where your identity comes from. And he says, hey, your role is this. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. A branch that is detached from the vine can do nothing. It has no potential. It is lifeless. It can bear no fruit. What if we genuinely believe that? That seems like something that's almost a statement that's hard to actually fully buy into. What if we really believed that apart from him, we can do nothing? I think that, we think about somebody trying to do something apart from God or separate from God. And, a lot of times in church world, we'll paint this picture like it was this big rebellious streak. And somebody's like, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to do it my own way. I'm smart enough. And, they mess up their lives or whatever. And I think that's fine. I think that's one way this might happen. But I almost think a more accurate picture is to think about like a young child who thinks that they're independent and they can do things without their parents. We had our community group over this past Sunday, and we invited them over to watch some commercials and a J-Lo concert. And there was some football in between or something. And they came over, and one of the couples in the group, they brought their 2-year-old daughter, and she is just one of those kids. It's so weird how you can be in front of so many kids and think genuinely like you're the cutest kid I've ever seen, but she's like the cutest girl you've ever seen in your life, right? And at one point, most of the couples are hanging out in the kitchen eating some food, and she walks over to the living room like 10 feet away, and she comes by the coffee table where the Play-Doh is. And I'm on the couch, and a couple other guys are on the couch. And she gets the Play-Doh out, and she starts playing with the Play-Doh. And then she goes around, and she's really excited to show everybody around the couch her creation, which was actually like a ball of Play-Doh that she squeezed. So she's got this Play-Doh, it's got her fingerprints on it, and she's going around, and she's saying, look, 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 and she's so excited. And she has, in this moment, right? It's just adorable. She has no concept in this moment that her parents provided the Play-Doh, that they bought the Play-Doh, that they can take the Play-Doh away at any given moment. She has no idea. She's not thinking about the fact that her parents are 10 feet away in the kitchen. I mean, this is her first taste of independence and creativity, and she's not thinking about them in this moment. She's not thinking about that when they say it's time to go home, it's time to go home, and there's nothing she's going to be able to do about it. This 2-year-old cannot comprehend. There is no paradigm for her to understand that her DNA is made up of her parents, that she is literally made up of her mom and dad. She can't even begin to process those things. It's just cute. It's just adorable. And I think that's almost a better picture of us trying to do anything apart from our Father. If God is real and he's that big, we are like a bunch of 2-year-olds when we're like, I'm going to do things my own way. I'm going to figure it out. I'm not interested in what you have to say. And look what I've created with my life. And look how much success. And look at this business and, all this kind of stuff. Look at me. I'm so smart. It's like cute. It's like adorable that we would go away from the one that created relationships to try to do anything in our lives of meaning and value and purpose. I think it's more like that. And as we remain in him, if we choose to do the opposite, and we choose to stay close to him and stay in the relationship, then the fruit that we produce is actually a little bit of what we talked about in part 1. We talked about the fruit of the Spirit, and what you will experience is love, joy, peace, forbearance or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. What if that was the list that we brought to a relationship? What if that was on our list? What we didn't have time to talk about last week is how exhausting that would be to actually get this list right all the time. That would be hard enough to do tonight to just get everything right on this list, much less Monday, much less Friday when we're tired at the end of the week, much less for a lifetime or for a marriage. That would be exhausting. But Jesus' language doesn't sound like a big weight or a big burden. He doesn't tell us to power up and work really, really hard. He says something completely different. He says this is our role. He says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. That's not a weight. That's not a burden. That's not us trying really, really hard. Fruit isn't produced by the vine going, fruit, right? That's not how fruit is made. Fruit results over time just by staying attached to the vine. He says the reason for which you and I exist, the reason that we have been created, is to rest in the Father's love and to allow that love to flow through us to other people. That's it. That's why you and I are alive. That's why you and I are here. This is not a burden he is placing on us. He's saying, hey, just stay close to me. Then he tells us how to do that. He says, if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. He's not saying if you don't keep my commands, I won't love you anymore. He's saying this is about you staying in awareness of my love and staying close to my love. And one of the ways that you do that is you keep my commands. Now, I do think we could get kind of practical with this. I think there's some things that we could talk about to say, what does remaining or abiding in his love look like? I think going to church is an example of that. If you went to every service over a month, that's 4 hours of your whole month where you're being reminded of who you are, who God says you are, and who God is. That's a great way to remain. If you chose, a couple of weeks ago to get into a community group, what an incredible way to remain in God's love and be reminded of his love by important people in your life that you connect with. I think, we use the phrase a lot here, time with God, to refer to reading your Bible, journaling, praying, talking to God. Maybe if you've grown up in church, you heard more of an old school kind of quiet time or devotional or something. I think all those are fine. We choose to call it a time with God because we think that's what it is. It is spending time with the most important relationship in our life. And when we choose to do that early in the morning before the chaos and the anxiety and the stress and the schedule of the day fully comes, and we choose to prioritize that, it's like any relationship you spend a lot of time with. And you start talking a little bit more like those people, and you start thinking a little bit more like those people, and you start acting a little bit more like those people. And we think the same thing kind of happens the more you remain in a relationship with him. Running the big decisions of your life through the lens of your Heavenly Father is a way to remain in his love. Gosh, I know he's attractive. I know she's attractive. But if I were to pause and ask the question, would God want me to be in a relationship with this person? Maybe that's clarifying for me. Maybe it's not. Should I stay in this relationship? Should I fight for this relationship? Or is this the wrong relationship? That may be clarifying. Maybe it's not. But those are examples of remaining. And what's interesting is when we put in those efforts, the effort is meant to just to get us to a place where remaining in his love is actually more effortless. That the longer we begin to do those things, the more it's like, I just notice him. I notice him in the little things. I run my decisions by him. I pray more. I talk to him more. I'm grateful for him more. I see him and the people around me more. And I'm remaining in his love. This is what it looks like to abide and to remain. But I think we should be really clear on when Jesus has commands, what specifically is he talking about? Because that's a big deal. If you keep his commands, you remain in his love, we want to know what the command is. He says one more sentence, and then he gives us that answer. But the one other sentence he says first is so great because he tells us why we're having the whole conversation. He says, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. In other words, you can search the universe. You can travel as much as you want to travel, spend as much money as you want to spend, accumulate as much as you want to accumulate. You can date as many people as you want. You can marry as many people as you want. You can be as successful as you want. Your joy will never be fully satisfied outside of resting in my love. And that's not an exclusive statement. That's an inclusive statement because all people on this planet can come to him the same way, just as they are. That's an incredible statement. But then he tells us what his command is. He says, my command is this: love each other. Would you see that and maybe you think, gosh, that sounds a little soft. That sounds a little bit undefined. That sounds a little bit touchy-feely or a little bit sappy. What exactly do you mean by that? How far are we supposed to go with that? And then he finishes his sentence and he says, as I have loved you. I'm the example. And then that is all the parameters that we could ever need. The disciples, they had enough to go on already with the way he'd loved them the last 3 years. They had no idea that a couple of hours later, he was going to put on the greatest display of love that the world has ever known. It would take their breath away because it took his breath away. And if somebody is willing to die for you, you do not ever have to wonder if they are for you. And he says, this is the starting point. This is the lens through which you view all the relationships in your life. You remain in the love that I have for you, and you allow it to flow to the people around you. Because he finishes and says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. So my question for you is, are you searching for the right person? Are you searching for your joy to be complete in a person outside of the person of Jesus? If you're single, are you searching for that person that's going to complete you? If you're in a long-term relationship, are you hoping that something's going to change about the person on the other side of you? Or are you becoming the right person? Because the fatal flaw of the right person myth is this: it's the belief that one person has the ability, or maybe worse, the responsibility to make me happy, complete, and content. That is way too much pressure to put on one human being. And I don't mean that you should lower your standards and marry a bum who's no good for you because, gosh, it's not going to work with anybody. I don't mean that that special person in your life can't add value to your life. That's not what I'm saying. But if I take Emily off of anything but a gift from God, if I make her my God, meaning all of my identity, all of my self-worth, all of my confidence as a man, all of my validation and happiness comes from her, or if I make her less than a gift from God, and I disrespect, and I dishonor, and I say, you are something to be used for my benefit and my happiness, in either of those places, it is going to be destructive for her, and it's going to be self-destructive for me. So, are you becoming the right person? Going back to our analogy, this is kind of what it looks like. If this is us and our parts, and this is them and their parts, and we've realized the gaps exist in both of us, when we buy into the right person myth, this is kind of what we're asking. This is kind of what we're expecting. We're like, gosh, I've realized I've always had this gap, and I've never really felt like I'm enough. Maybe you know where that comes from. Maybe you don't. Maybe man, as a kid, my dad never said he was proud of me. He never said he loved me. I didn't have a father figure. Maybe there was something with your mom. Maybe there was something that happened to you, or something that you've done that you regret, and now you never feel enough. You never feel man enough. You never feel smart enough. You never feel pretty enough. And my expectation, if you're the right person, well, obviously, you're going to make me feel like enough, and you're going to fill that gap for me. And I've had this fear, and I've had this anxiety, and this stress, and this low-key depression for so long, and I feel like once we're together, if you're the right person, well then, gosh, you're going to fill that gap for me. I feel like, man, if you were the right person, that would be true. But since I'm scared and I'm afraid and I'm not happy, I don't know, maybe you're not the right person. Maybe it's just been my happiness. I haven't been happy for a long time. And if you were the right person, I wouldn't have to try so hard. This would be easier. I would just be excited to come home at the end of the day. So you know what? Maybe you're just not the right person. See, the collapse of a relationship, the collapse of a person, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens one brick at a time, one wrong perspective move at a time. And this is what it leads to. It leads to destruction. But what happens when we flip? What happens when we flip our perspective? Because absolutely, we certainly still have our gaps. That is undeniable. You can't get away from that. So we've still got our gaps. But what do we do now? Do we try really hard? Do we power up? Do we just get really focused? What's the goal here? It looks like resting in God's love for you. It looks like saying, I haven't ever felt like enough. That's true. I've carried this shame with me my whole life, and I've believed that I am the worst moment that has happened to me. But Jesus, I'm just going to try, and I don't even know what this looks like, but I'm going to try defining my worth and my identity by what you say. And Jesus, what you say is I am enough. What you say is I'm the son, I am the daughter of the God of the universe. You say I'm the apple of your eye. You say I have incredible value and worth. You say I am forgiven. Not like God has gotten over it. You say I am forgiven. I am washed white as snow. And I'm going to define my identity by you and what you say for the first time ever. And you start to experience things that you couldn't ever do before on your own. I think, for example, something like forgiveness. This certainly isn't a forgiveness message. That forgiveness is so complex. It could be such a process. I don't want to minimize anything that you have gone through. But when I think about forgiveness, I don't know how you really forgive. Like cancel the debt, not just get over, outside of the cross of Christ, outside of the person of Jesus. I remember the last Christmas when we were in Dallas with Emily's family. We were visiting, and her grandpa that lives in Dallas, her grandpa and grandma, they're both still alive, and they had just celebrated their 62nd wedding anniversary. They've now been married 63 years. This was a year ago I had this conversation. And I remember I sat down at the dinner table, and it was just me and her grandpa in the room, and they had just celebrated, and I was like, congratulations, that's amazing. And my next question was, how do you make it to 62 years? Like, so few humans will ever do that. How do you make it to 62 years? And I thought this was going to be one of those moments where he has like kind of this wise sage moment and leans back and thinks for a while. And I'm like, hey, is your hearing aid on? Like, did you hear me? But he responded right away. I was like, how do you stay married 62 years? And he said, oh, forgiveness. Yeah, absolutely, forgiveness. I don't know how you forgive the small things and the big things without first realizing the depth to which you personally have been forgiven. I don't know how you give what you haven't received before. And when you begin to understand the depth of your own sin and the depth to which you have been completely forgiven, you discover an ability that you never knew you had before to genuinely forgive another. What about just getting over ourselves? I mean, we're born with this selfish streak inside of us. How is it possible that we come home at the end of the day and, we're so tired every single day and we're like, I don't want to engage. I don't have the strength. I can't talk to the kids. I need to just kick back. I need to just relax. I haven't been happy for so long. How do we even just get over our own selfishness? Well, when we rest in the Father's love, we begin to realize over time how incredibly patient he has been with us every single day of our lives, that he gave up his life for us. Paul says, husbands, we are called to love our wives like Christ loved the church, and Christ died for the church. If you're single, you're dating, you're not searching for the person that's going to make you happy for the rest of your life. You're searching for the person that you are willing to die for the rest of your life. And I don't know how we get to that kind of a perspective, that kind of selflessness, without understanding first what our Heavenly Father has done for us. And we keep inviting him into new places, and we take even some of our strengths and replace those with him, and they get better as we continue to rest, as we continue to abide in. And if you still are like, I need a list, I need to know what I'm looking for, well, maybe your new right person list is this. Maybe it's the fruit that we talked about. It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Maybe you're like, hey, this is what I'm going to bring to a relationship. This is what I'm becoming. Or maybe, if you need a list of what you're looking for, this is what you're looking for. And you meet somebody that exudes these things without seemingly even trying. It's like, what is that? It's almost like they're pulling from something outside of themselves. Here's the last question I have for today. Are you becoming the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? If you are single or you are dating, do you realize what an incredible phase that you are in, that you can become, that you can build this amazing foundation before you make that incredible promise to somebody for your life? If you are married, do you realize how much better this strategy is? That rather than trying to fix or control or hoping so-and-so is going to change or look elsewhere, do you realize how much better the strategy is to just become the person that you hope they're going to become and watch how that inspires and has an impact on them? And this is just, again, my personal opinion. You may disagree with this, but I think at the end of the day, however we got to be here today, the one we're really all looking for is the person of Jesus. And what he is looking for is someone who's willing to rest in his love, to abide, to remain, to trust him, and to allow that love to flow into everybody else around us. As long as we are searching and evaluating, we'll be constantly aware of what we don't have. But when we become from a place realizing we already have enough and we found everything we're searching for in the joy of Jesus, then the limits on what we can become are absolutely endless. It is amazing. So are you searching, or are you becoming the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? I'd love to pray to end our time. Heavenly Father, God, thank you that you first modeled this love for us before we were ever born. God, thank you that you walk through this with us, that you lend us the strength that we could never have on our own. God, thank you that our joy is complete in you. God, thank you that we found what we're looking for in you. And God, I don't want any of this conversation to be oversimplified. I know relationships are complex. I know our situations are difficult. But God, I just ask that you show us what is the next step. Not 100 steps down the line, but what is the next step of resting in your love in a way that we never have before and loving people accordingly. God, we're so grateful that you will walk through us in every step of that journey. We love you, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray all of these things. Amen. You guys have an incredible week, and we'd love to see you for part 3 next week.